Welcome back to We Know Scripted TV, where today we know The Last of Us, and we are doing a deep dive into Season 2, Episode 1. My name is Grace, but of course, I'm not alone. The Last of Us is all about companions, and I'm here with another companion of my own. It's Taran Armstrong. Taran, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm here, ready for The Last of Us. We are I think in this world of podcasting, we are the last of The Last of Us podcasts.
Yeah, presumably there's no random infected or anything that come later in the week, any more deeper dives. We're the last of us.
Mm,
Yeah. Mike and I were the first of us, and you and I are the last of us.
yeah.
Yeah. We are here to talk about The Last of Us, and I specifically said a deep dive because you and I had a conversation on the Tastemakers, and we had basically like, should we rename, because we've been kind of called the Video Game Club, and that might be what you're seeing just because of the way graphics and the podcast has been published. But we will chat with the folks who do all the lovely behind the scenes work at RHAP, We Know Scripted TV, to maybe go with a little bit of a rebrand. We definitely will be
We're open to
talking.
feedback as well. Like, what do you
Yeah,
guys like in
yeah,
terms of what we call this? Because, I do think that calling it the Video Game Club might, yeah, as Grace has described, might imply that if you haven't played the video game or that you're not into video games, that
that's
you
right.
might not want to listen to this podcast. But I think that in many ways, I think the people who haven't played the game or aren't into the game might appreciate this podcast even more,
I agree.
because hopefully we do a good job of being completely spoiler free while still being able to talk about things in a context that are, hopefully more insightful than you could otherwise be if you can't talk about video games at all.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things we do on the Tastemakers, which is not just to say, hey, maybe you should watch that, but it's also, I feel like sometimes we're giving you this extra information that you can take to a friend, and someone's like, hey, I'm watching The Pit. And you can be like, did you know that The Pit actually blah, 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 blah? Like, that's, the service that we were providing. There's a little bit, I
That
think
was
we're,
actually one of the facts we gave about the pit was
that
blah
it's
blah blah
blah,
blah
blah,
blah.
blah. This blah,
Yeah, yeah.
they did have a severe case of the blah, blah, blahs that they
Hmm.
had to get through. There's a lot of blah blah blahs in terms of the sad version of that in The Last of Us. So yeah, providing some context. We will never spoil what is to come, only ever giving context for things that are happening right now, and those might not even be video game related. They could be from any other thing that we have endeavored in. I believe I have not watched this yet. Taryn, did you see that there is a behind the scenes making of episode 1 of The
Yep.
Last of Us? So you have that context.
That plus the podcast that they released, the official
That
podcast,
that's right.
the
And
Thematic.
also, we can incorporate some of your feedback. So, just to recap our schedule, Mike Bloom and I will always be live right after the episode, whether we're actually live or not, TBD. I think actually I can say this. I believe we are planning to go live next Sunday after the episode, as Mike Bloom is actually away. He has to go outside of the walls where all the monsters are. And so Josh Wigler tentatively planned to join me to recap the episode right after, live on the We Know Scripted TV YouTube feed. And then about a day later-ish or so, Taryn, you and I will come with the deep dive. And so there is a little bit of time for people to get feedback, which we can also take into account. We would just advise people to try not to spoil anything in a public setting. Taryn and I both played the video game, so you could send us a DM or email or whatever way you want to get in touch with us in terms of a public-facing thing. Try to keep that spoiler-free, but we'll try to incorporate that when we can. So I talked about
And
episode
just
1. Yes,
sorry,
go
just to
ahead.
be clear
You're
again,
good.
no spoilers in the first part. We will
Right.
then, at the end, probably not as long as the non-spoiler
Yes.
section, we will clearly delineate. We will now get into actual spoilers. That's where you might want to dip out if you
That's
have
right.
not if you don't have any knowledge of the game or future events.
That is correct. Okay, so I chatted with about the premiere episode of season 2 with Mike Bloom yesterday. People can listen to that podcast. So I've given my thoughts, and I am generally pretty high on the episode, and felt like I was more high on it after talking with Mike Bloom. But Taryn, what were your thoughts about the season premiere of The Last of Us?
I thought it was very good, which is what I expected. I think that the biggest knock on the episode is that it takes place a couple years, 2 years after the first season, and it's just one episode,
Mhm.
and it's like it has to do a lot to get you back in. And unlike the first episode of the first season, we're not sort of like building a world and then having like an inciting incident and like getting you hooked. We're really just like reacclimating to things. And so we don't really have an inciting incident in this episode. It is just It's doing the work of building the world and catching us up on what has happened and where they are. And so I think that ultimately this is not like the most exciting episode of television. And I think in an ideal world, you maybe are able to sort of have a little bit extra time to really dig in and sort of get to what is going to be the meat of this season. Right now, the primary meat of the season is the relationship between Joel and Ellie, which is always sort of the meat of the show. But sort of like, where are we going to go from here? I think we're getting some hints of it in this episode, with these people coming to Jackson at the end, and the cordyceps and stuff in the pipes, like things that are going to start kicking things off, presumably. But we don't get that yet, and so instead, this is sort of like a slower paced episode. I think it is a very good one. I don't think it is a mistake to do it this way. But I think that like as a first episode after 2 years, that's probably the worst thing you could say about it, is that it wasn't quite like starting with a bang.
Which we were talking this week on the Tastemakers, that I was like, I'm over the like, gotta have action, gotta do it, gotta go right away, gotta be in it, gotta be exciting, so you don't switch the TV and do something else. This is a show that has earned the trust after season 1 of its viewing audience. I think HBO expected a high turnout rate for this episode. So I mean, two things here about this first episode is that this is true to the video game. The video game does a time jump. There's obviously a bigger gap between the first game and the second game, and so maybe that in some ways made more sense. But it's also, they could have, they don't have to worry about actors aging or anything like that if you're doing a video game. So they could have just done immediately where they left off, and this was a story decision that they made, and I think it does work quite effectively. So yeah, this is the first thing where we can say, like, this is what they do in the game. The game starts 5 years after, I believe that's correct. It does starts 5 years into the future, does a flash forward, and then we will sort of like pick up with these characters. And yeah, I think the point about this being like the Ellie and Joel, show, I think continues to be true here. Although interestingly, which we'll talk about later, we do introduce we bookend this episode with the introduction of a new character, new characters that we'll talk about. But yeah, I tend to agree with you that it had a lot of work to do, but I think, like, as Mike and I were like diving into particular scenes that I'm excited to chat with you about, this is a really rewarding and thematically rich show.
Yes. Now, you may or may not have heard our coverage of season 1. But if you haven't, or if you don't remember, a lot of what we talked about throughout season 1 was how much the show deals with love and the dangers of love, and the ways in which Joel and his violence is attractive to Ellie, in the beginning, because he's this protective figure, and then by the end, that violence and sort of protective instinct it becomes a double-edged sword, in the same way that like this idea of love becomes a double-edged sword. And he robs her of her purpose at the end. He stops her from being able to potentially be the savior of mankind, which is devastating for many reasons, obviously. But one of them is that, throughout the series, she's losing people, and it feels like the one thing that she can do to make that right is contribute to helping save others. And again, he takes that from her at the end of season 1 by killing the fireflies and stopping the surgery. And the other is that, like, he lies to her about it. He doesn't even sort of give her that agency. She's robbed of her purpose, and now she's being used by Joel as sort of a replacement for his daughter that he failed to save. Now he gets to save Ellie and make up for what he did. So while he's taking his, serving of, I'm going to make up for, I'm going to, I lost my daughter, I've lost people, but if I can save Ellie, that makes it right for me. While he gets to do that for himself, he's stealing that opportunity for Ellie, and lying to her about it. And so it's it's such a bleak and interesting ending to season one. One of my favorite sort of ways to end that story, this kind of story. And I think really what makes The Last of Us so unique. And so what we're getting here in season two is the continuation of that. What are the ramifications of an act like this? That it's, for as much as we can talk about the darkness of it, there's also still the beauty of it, the love of it. Like, he burned the world to save her. Like, that's something that you might see as romantic or beautiful, but it also has this dark side. And so, how do you deal with the fallout of that over 5 years? We are seeing the ramifications. Ellie is sick of overprotective Joel, right? Which is a pretty classic, like, teenage response to being a parent daughter relationship kind of situation. But this is really just like a front, because we know that she either knows or has a pretty good idea that he was lying to her. We know all the way back from when she asked the question in the first place, and
Yeah.
he gave her an answer, and she said, okay. And so this idea of, like, Joel being overprotective in this first scene with Ellie, she's being told, like, oh, well, we had to pull the punches. We don't want Joel to be mad at us. And then later on, she's with Joel's brother, and he's like, well, we pulled you from patrol because Joel didn't want you on patrol. And she's like, this is so annoying of Joel. And yes, that works again on the surface level as like a teenager to a parent, but it also is just another representation of what he has done to her. Robbing her of her purpose back at the Firefly headquarters, and now continuing to do that by continuing to protect her in ways that she doesn't want to be protected. And so I just find this already so interesting and so fascinating, the ways that this conflict is brought up and how we can see that it's been clearly evolving over the last 5 years.
Yeah, it just, the thing of, like, this is the Joel and Ellie story. I think that, like, there is nothing to me that's more interesting on the show than the two of them and where they are after this time jump. And I think you've done a really good job of talking through. I know that you didn't do it with Joel, but I want to, like, sort of highlight. So you have this Ellie piece where she is 19 now. She, the young adult, she's, a teenager, whatever, blah blah blah. But her whole life she has not had control. She's not had agency. And she's in the situation where somebody sort of removed the most agency she could have ever had. And she is rebelling against that. On the other side of things, you have Joel, and I talked about this on the recap, on the immediate sort of reaction pod, about the scene in the finale episode of season one where they talk about the fact that he has healed, and she says something about, like, there's time, and he says no, it wasn't time that did it, and alluding to the idea that it is actually Ellie that has made him want to continue on, even in this sort of post-apocalyptic world, after losing his daughter Sarah in the premiere episode. We get to this point where, like, when we meet him again, it's like almost like his worst fears had come true, where he had opened himself up to vulnerability and to love, and he's now feeling like it's not reciprocated. And by the time we get to him, like, it's been long enough that he's now in the phase where he's, like, trying to go to therapy to deal with that. But I think this idea that he's trying to figure out how to make sure that, like, this thing that he was so scared of, he ended up doing it, and as a result now he feels um like it's all kind of gone wrong. It's all been messed up. And the idea of there are two stories as they're navigating through, of, like, Ellie's journey for identity and figuring out who she is, and asserting control in her life, and Joel also trying to move forward, I think sometimes naively, with the idea that, like, he did the right thing. It was extremely fascinating, I think, to watch play out in this episode. I thought the episode was really well structured in the sense that we sort of both see Joel and Ellie moving along these paths, where we center ourselves in their stories, before we ended up seeing how they're sort of, like, butting heads and intertwining throughout the episode.
Yeah, and I mean, we see that from Joel in therapy. He's so clearly so desperate to force normalcy onto their situation. Like, hey, this is just a normal, like, teenage response, right? He's so clearly trying to force Ellie into the role of his daughter, and the therapist is like, she's not your daughter, right? Like, and because like, again, it was so necessary for him. He needed to save her to make right what happened with his daughter. And now that he's done that, that was his healing. Like, for as much as he says, like, Ellie healed him, in many ways, it's being able to save Ellie, to correct the mistakes of his past. I think that he sees to have like healed him, in that situation. And now that he has, healed theoretically, it's as if he's trying to ignore the entire period of time where he was broken, and just pick right up from where he left off with his original daughter. Like, as though the broken watch from when his daughter died, which stayed broken at the time that she died for 20
Yeah.
years, as
Yeah.
though he could just fix that watch, start the time running, and like nothing happened in between.
Yeah.
And he's trying to like forcibly ignore all of that stuff. And that is frustrating for Ellie, and it's frustrating for the therapist. It's a veneer that the therapist can see through, and she tries to pierce his defenses, to be like, dude, you're leaving something out. You're leaving about 20 years out, let alone like the thing that's actually at the heart of this issue. And he knows it too, right? Like, for as much as he's tried to ignore it, he clearly recognizes that something is wrong, and clearly recognizes that like, if he wants to fix it, he's going to have to do something to address it. And when the therapist is prodding him, she is like slowly enticing him into this like allure of like actually addressing it. You can see him like starting to feel like, okay, maybe I can talk about it. And then he comes to this realization, at least from my perspective, like, no, I can't. Not only was it like, well, I'm not going to admit that I did something wrong, but also like, this is me being protective. I'm not going to not protect her. And
Yeah.
by telling the secret, I'm putting her in danger. And so even if I wanted to, I have to again sacrifice in order to make sure that she's safe. And
Yeah.
so, you have this like dichotomy of, this side of him that wants to address it, that wants to talk about it, and the side of him that needs to continue to protect her, and needs to then therefore insist that that doesn't exist, and that this is just again a normal thing. Why can't she be like Dina, who's like such like she looks at me like I'm a good person?
Yeah.
Like, why, Joel? You're literally gaslighting like yourself and presumably Ellie and everyone else into believing that, there's nothing else that could be at the heart of this issue. And that's equal parts frustrating and also completely believable in Joel.
Yeah, so we talked about two characters already who we get to meet here. One in Gail, played by Catherine O'Hara, who is the psychotherapist who gets paid in weed and drinks during the sessions, and I love her, and she's amazing. And she is a new addition to the world of the show, not a character from the game, but is connected to a character from the game in Eugene, who gets named as a person who Joel killed. And I would like to talk about that as well of this edition. But I think there's a couple things here just before we get to Dina and Joel, because that's the thing as well of Dina and Joel having this conversation in Joel's house. The idea of Joel being like working in construction is so good that I don't think I really like as much was thinking about it when I was playing the game. But the idea that he is literally trying to like, it's funny because it's almost like he's going and doing that work instead of doing the actual work that fixing the town isn't important, and doing the construction for the whole town is an important thing to do.
He's going back to his old. He was a construction worker in his old life. Like, he is literally just trying
Picking
to
back
turn
up.
back time to when time stopped for him.
So good. Yeah. And then this like the metaphors you can pull from like somebody trying to fix something, and the idea like that he thinks that fixing this thing can just fix everything that's wrong, that he did wrong, is very good. I think it's very strong. We will learn with through Gale that and it's just this extra little beat that again is added into the show that I think is really strong, is this idea that Joel has a connection to Gale and the fact that he killed Eugene, which we presumably will find more about later. But it's this idea that he's not trying to do the same, but she knows that he's like, there's this reason why she should theoretically not even take him on as a client. She probably shouldn't even be doing therapy for him, and yet she is choosing to do it. She is choosing to move forward in terms of this relationship, but only to the degree at which like he chooses to be honest. She's the one who has to be like, let's talk about the elephant in the room that happened, and it's a thing that he's not willing to do in his relationship with Ellie, that I think is like a really strong thematic link into the show, into season 2.
Yeah. And then you have like Ellie's side of it too,
Right.
where she is again sort of like doing this rebellion. But you can imagine what this sort of like unspoken secret has done to her,
Yeah.
right? Like, something that I think we talked about in season 1 is that she lives with her immunity, right? And that is a secret that she has to keep to everyone, including her best friend and crush. And no matter how normal or like peaceful or whatever, she still has to keep this secret. And um, you know, having to keep a secret about yourself is so damaging, and we know this, right? Like this is something that a lot of people deal with in modern times, and not that Last of Us is not modern time theoretically, but like that can be so crushing to have a piece of you that you are just constantly needing to keep a secret, and there's a shame that is often attached to that kind of secret. And there was a time when she thought that secret didn't have to be shameful, didn't have to be something that she kept secret, that she was going to find people that would accept her, not only accept her, but view her as a savior. And that secret could be used to help others. The secret that is so attached to the survivor's guilt that she has, the reason she lived and so many of the other people that she cared about died, might be able to be used to help others. And again, Joel robbed that of her. And so that like, that internalized shame is exponentially magnified by that failure and that stolen promise. And so now you see her 5 years later, and she is doing typical teenager stuff, but also this stuff magnified and connected to all of the events that we've seen in season 1. She's taking risks because she can. She's trying to be as useful as possible. Like, hey, I can take these risks because if I get bit, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a small way that she can make use of this secret. And she wants to be as useful as possible. She wants to have as much agency as possible. And Joel trying to take even that away from her is just more reminder of what he did to her, and more reminder that she has this shameful thing about herself. And obviously, I think that like there are so many connections that you could make to the fact to her sexuality here, that like when I talk about like people who have secrets about themselves that they sometimes feel like they need to keep because they might be in danger because of it or whatever else, like that obviously is something that a lot of people deal with. For Ellie, her sexuality is something that the world ended in 2003. They talked about this in the official podcast. Like the acceptance for LGBTQ plus people in 2003 was not exactly at an all-time high, and so like some of that social progress clearly was not exactly made. But at the same time, like she grows up in this new kind of society, and her sexuality is something that she can own and feel comfortable about. She is an openly queer person, and she is clearly not ashamed of it. And so when she's attacked for her sexuality, like this is the thing where she can actually feel like, no, I can defend myself about this. This isn't a secret. I don't have to be ashamed of this. And Joel comes in and tries to rob her of that as well, right? Like that's when she breaks. That's when it's like, this is too, like, get out of here. Like, what is wrong with you? Let
Yeah.
me be a human being. I thought all that was so interesting and so compelling to her character. And again, like, I'm just so interested to see the dynamics of this relationship.
Yeah. I kind of butted up against both when I watched the episode each time. That first scene where she's like doing the training, and I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, it's fine. Like, it's a fine scene. It actually is really good thematically, and just builds on everything else, which is that like they've you know they're pulling punches on her, and there's this sort of like the bravado of like, you still got punched in the face, like, we punch you first. She says boom mother effer, I think, is her
Mhm.
response. And then she's mad that even in this thing that's supposed to be about training, fighting to be the better fighter, people are holding back. They're sort of you know uh handling her with kid gloves. The other piece of it that I think is really interesting is, when I first watched it, my immediate reaction was like, oh, it's supposed to be 19. She doesn't really look 19. I know Bella Ramsey is, I believe Bella Ramsey is older than that. I believe they are 21. I think, if I maybe am correct in saying that. My first instinct was like, oh, like, but then I realized I'm kind of doing the same thing that everyone in the show is doing. I'm sort of babying Ellie. I actually think it works pretty well. I feel like there is a quite a stark difference between Ellie in the game, like game 1 to game 2, that I think isn't as dramatic in the show. But I actually think that's okay, because I think that's just like the Bella Ramsey as the performer of Ellie. I think it works really well for these themes of people always not thinking she's capable enough or older. Like, she's 19. Like, what is Joel doing? Like, even in a post-apocalyptic world, like, no 19-year-old should probably be, as controlled as she is. But yeah, all leading up to the dance scene, that is a pretty faithful recreation of from the video game. But yeah, your point about, I hadn't really thought about the Ellie's sexuality, and the thing there of like having they're like the metaphor there, but it not being a thing in the show, but actually being something that she's very confident in and about. But we also get, the first thing you talked about was like, if you listen to our season 1 coverage, we were all in on the like love and danger and violence and that stuff. And that probably shines through the most in this conversation between Dina and Ellie, where they are like essentially flirting, but it's all in the language of like, who are they looking at? They're looking at you, Ellie. Ellie saying, "I'm not a threat," and Dina says, "Well, I think you think you are." All wrapped up in sort of this idea of like of love and violence, and the two being intertwined in this world, Taran.
Yeah. And obviously that makes a lot of sense in this context. I think that the relationship with Dina is really interesting. You get to see Ellie sort of be her own person and have more agency outside of that. And Dina is such a fun character here. I think that in the context of the video game, I would say that Dina is slightly altered in terms of her personality. And I have to imagine that a huge portion of that is just down to performance.
Yeah.
Because I apologize for not knowing the actor's name, but
That's Isabella Merced. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but that's the, yeah, I think,
yeah.
yeah, rough,
I
close.
mean, I've seen nothing but immense praise. She's captivating and so charismatic in this role. And quite frankly, I think it works better this way for what they're doing, because like you can for sure see why Ellie would be so captivated by her. You can see why other people would be captivated by her, and yeah, through it all, it's all about like it's about what is it? The people should be scared of you,
Yeah,
Ellie.
people should be scared of you. Yeah.
And for Dina to be the one person who's telling Ellie that, the one person who is respecting Ellie, let's go off together and kill some clickers, not trying to baby Ellie. And then out, like, the moment of their connection is telling Ellie they should be scared of you. They shouldn't be fearful for you. They should be fearful of you, essentially, right? Like, that's kind of what she's, obviously it's in a different context, but like those are the words that she's saying. And so like this is like the thing that Ellie needs the most in this moment. She needs somebody to believe in her, and to believe that she can be threatening, because that is her role model, that she is going to be to some capacity the Joel of this of like she's not going to be the one who is robbed of her purpose. She's going to be the one that is in control of her own fate, and can rob other people of their purposes if she so pleases.
Yeah. I don't think there's a scene that is more like, oh man, this is just like, this is what it feels like to play the video game, than when Dina and Ellie are on patrol and they climb up on the truck that's perfectly situated to get them onto the landing of a of the window, where they can then sneak into the window, sneak around, throw the bottle to get them. But we are introduced to new infected here in a stalker, in a scene that I thought worked pretty well. They really like having people fall through floors on the show so far, Taran. This is
I mean, it makes sense,
back-to-back seasons.
the rotten, decrepit. This
Yeah,
is like 25 years post-apocalypse, so it's. I guess it's not. It's surprising it doesn't happen more often.
yeah, for sure.
But although I do wonder, like, what was that? I guess they were on the second floor, right? Because they
Yeah, they
climbed
were.
up on the truck, so that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah.
Um,
In addition to,
this
yes,
is
go ahead. Sorry.
such a video game scene. I don't know how much that translates if you watch this and you haven't played the video game at all or seen any footage of it. If you feel like this is video game esque, having just watched it, which I think is a testament to the scene itself, that it
Mm,
doesn't, like, it feels very video game without feeling pigeonholed into that,
yeah,
because it works perfectly as a normal scene too. But between like throwing the bottle, which is a classic video game move, to the using a shank to take down the
yep,
clicker,
yep,
and then even falling through the floor happens.
yeah.
Okay, um,
I'm waiting for the moment where they're like, we should try to jump over to that landing. And then they try, and it's like, oh no, we just physically actually can't jump. So that must be the way we can't go, And they'll go around and go somewhere else.
yeah, sorry, there's a gate here that we
Yeah, that's right.
can't go through.
Well, we better go
Ugh.
somewhere
The
else. Yeah.
holes are definitely big enough that we could fit through them, but we can't go through it. And I mean, it just, I think it's worth pointing out here again, if you're not a video game person, or maybe you just don't remember a lot of the game, that there is a lot of dedication to accuracy with the visuals.
Yeah.
That, like, first of all, Jackson itself
Oh
looks
my God. It looks amazing.
identical.
Looks amazing.
And even this section here where they're, going through this little market, the employee of the month thing,
Yeah.
taken directly from the game,
Yeah.
the little dog on the for one of the months. And
Yep.
um like they they do a lot. And I am not a person that says that you have to be super faithful to source material, as you may or may not know. But I do think there's so much value in it when you can, especially for a visual translation, because the
Yeah.
unlike a book, you saw these things in the video game, and so to
Yep.
see them come
Yep.
to life in the show really puts you there. Like, there's very little barrier between how you felt playing the game and watching the show to feel like it's the same exact world. And I think that works really well. But this stalker is a video game enemy, very
Mhm.
annoying one.
Very annoying.
Uh, Probably the least favorite of any enemy that you face
Yep.
in The Last of Us,
Yeah.
because yeah, they're not stupid.
So the one thing I will give, the show credit for is that these are different mediums. And so there is the way in which you get to do slightly different things than you get to do when you're in a video game. And it's not that the video game couldn't have done like a slow-mo tracking shot of the feet of a stalker and then a zoom up close up of the like fungus things coming out of their nostrils, but it's just not how the game works. You get cutscenes, but not in the action. Like in the action, you're mostly fighting, and you want to limit in a video game how much like cutscene fighting there is in general, because then you're not playing the video game, like you're seeing something happen, which is not the same. And so I do love that the show did, and particularly it was this scene in particular that I thought was like, oh, that's a thing you can't really do in the video game, because when you would see these things, it's not normally when you would like, that's not how you interact with them. So the like pan, like the tracking shot as like the feet of the stalker are going across, and then the like fungus stuff coming out of the nose, I thought was disgusting in the best way possible. Like it looked visually incredible. As they're doing the patrol, we're going to meet two other characters that we'll just highlight, which is we get Jesse, who is Dina's ex, and we also get Kat, who is Ellie's ex. And Jesse and Dina and Tommy were all added as main cast members this season, as opposed to season 1, which only had Pedro and Bella as our main cast. Everybody else was guest or supporting. So a little bit of a change. So Jesse, they don't get much of them in this episode. We get a little bit, we get a fair bit of Jesse, I guess, in the episode. But yeah, new characters.
So, I was kind of like, Kat felt a little old for Ellie.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know what age she is, but she was like put in charge, and there was another like older looking guy that was also like, well, if he's not older than Kat, why wouldn't he be put in charge? And so if she's as old as him, then that feels kind of old.
I don't. That's a good point.
But maybe as Dina put it, well, she's the other one. There wasn't a lot of options.
Yeah. It could be that this is Noah Lamanna, who I believe is also non-binary. So that's that is quite interesting, I think. Also seems to be based out of Toronto. So I now can't say anything bad about Kat. I'm so sorry. What do you want to jump to? What do you want to jump to next, Taran? We've talked about Ellie and Dina. We talked a little bit about Joel and Gail.
So yeah, I mean, so with Gail the therapist, I think this is one of the small hiccups that I found in the episode, which is, and I haven't seen a lot of people talk about this, although I have seen many people with the same issue that I had, which is that when Gail brings up her husband Eugene,
yes,
it took me longer than it should have in the middle of trying to watch this very dramatic scene to figure out if I was supposed to know who that was. Because we just came back from, a 2-year gap, having watched season 1, a 5-year time jump, and we just probably watched a very good recap of season 1. I thought that was very well put together. And so when Gail says, well, you killed my husband, you shot my husband, whatever she says, I was like, oh wait, did Joel kill someone the last time they were here? Am I supposed to know that? What happened? Because I remember they captured them. It was tense. Did he shoot someone? I don't remember now. I feel like she'd be more mad at him if that happened. Wait, no. She said this was her first birthday without him. Therefore, he must have died in the time jump. Therefore, I'm not supposed to know this. Okay, I'm back in the scene. And that to me just was like a little bit frustrating that I had to go through that. And maybe I'm just slow, but like, I just felt like it was like, I don't know. I needed a little bit of extra context to know that I wasn't supposed to know. I think would have been nice.
Yep, that's totally fair. I mean, I feel like that's interesting for you as like a video game player. Like it probably worked even less so for like it'd be like, yeah, we're supposed to remember who Eugene, Eugene is.
There are some people who probably have better memories than me who might remember Eugene as a character from the game. This is, I don't think, spoilery whatsoever, but like Eugene has a slightly different fate as a character in the game, but he's also not a big character in the game. No. He's just somebody you sort of learn about through environmental clues.
Kind of
he makes the weed.
It's kind of interesting in the sense that, like, to some degree, he's more in line with like Bill and Frank from season, where like they get this like sort of like I think like Eugene has been cast. We talked about this on the reaction pod. Like Eugene has been cast in the show. We're going to see him. How we're going to see him? I mean, a flashback, obviously. So will be interesting. But it feels like that, like they're expanding out that a little bit in a way that I think, probably could have been done a little bit differently. And it's funny because all you need is just like a slight change in dialogue to make us like a little more like on it in terms of like, am I supposed to know something? Am I supposed to know the background here? Etc. Should we talk about the opening and closing of the episodes, Taran, which We start with Caitlin Dever appearing on the screen as a new
I'm
character,
already weirded
Abby.
out by her having an American accent now, having watched her in apple cider vinegar.
Which is funny because she's not. She
I
is.
know.
She is American. That's hilarious. And she is with a group of people, and I think Mike was like a little even like, are we exactly supposed to know? You know, whatever. But they are presume they're fireflies. And Caitlin Dever's father was killed in the events that happened at the end of season 1 at the hospital, the Firefly Hospital, and is going to seek revenge and get support from her lovely group of friends. That is, directly after the events of season 1, as opposed to then the end of the episode where we are 5 years later, where they are returning, or they have come across Jackson. So yeah, what'd you make of sort of the book ending here, Taran?
Yeah, well, I would say another small nitpick here, which is that I don't know if I'm the only one that saw it this way. Just visually, there was something off about this scene to me.
The
It
last
just
one?
was like a little, the first one,
Okay.
very opening scene with Caitlin Devers. It just felt a little too clean, maybe, and like the actors, I think, also just looked a little too clean. It, I got slight like CW vibes
Interesting. Okay.
from the visuals of just this opening scene. None of the rest of the show felt this way.
Yeah.
But like, every time I see a clip from this now too, I'm like, yeah, it still feels just a slightly off to me.
Interesting.
But so I was a little bit concerned for that being the opening scene, but then very quickly the visuals became amazing again. So it might just be me. But anyway, I think that basically, it feels like what they're doing here is setting up like a new potential antagonist for our main characters. Somebody who is threatening not only because she's looking for revenge, but also, as we saw throughout the episode, like she also potentially carries the truth with her. And what does that mean for Joel and Ellie's relationship? What does it mean for Jackson and how they view Joel and Ellie? There's all kinds of different possibilities there. And the fact that they've spent the last 5 years theoretically searching for Joel is certainly a sign that they are probably pretty determined and dangerous. So we'll have to be on the lookout for that.
Or they forgot, and then they woke up and they're like, "Oh shoot, we got, oh man, gray hair guy, beard,
You
man,
did make that promise.
come on."
Oh, and you said the thing about slowly. Oh, I remember now. Yeah.
Is this what you meant by slowly 5 years? Jeez. Okay. All right. All right.
We have to wait at least 5 years.
Mhm.
He's probably in a lot of emotional turmoil from the decision that he made. So we just want to let him continue to suffer in that emotional turmoil for as long as possible. And I think we are also seeing that this is a two-pronged sort of thing. That there's also another threat from the cordyceps, from the mushrooms. They're growing in the pipes. And they talked about this on the podcast being sort of like a almost like pushback from nature, that like the more that you try to expand and create as humans, the more that like you will have to pay for that because you are essentially fighting against nature. And so this is a cost of their expansion. And we saw a little bit of the debate there about like, should you let people in? And I have to imagine that's going to come into play when it comes to these now threats coming. Like, are they going to be able to just be let in the gates? Are they going to be able to infiltrate? But also, because of letting people in, they are not just a threat via those people and their potential infections, but also because they're having to build more, they're now running into more natural dangers. And we saw what happened in the city that I don't remember, where the infected just attacked from underground.
Is that right? No, it wasn't. I think they were mad that it wasn't Pittsburgh. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, in the game, I think it's Pittsburgh. Doesn't matter. Someone will tell us in the comments.
Either way, yes, they were attacked from underground. So like, there's a lot of looming danger over this situation, and I think that is sort of the promise of like what is going to really kickstart this season. And yeah, we'll have to see what it is and how it comes.
I like it. I like them both. I thought it Yeah, worked well, to sort of like, yeah, I get the point of, and I would like both times I watch it, like the second time I was like, oh yeah, the giraffes, like, oh yeah, it's like this, and so like a little, slow start, but I do think the ending works in the sort of the double thing of, and I really thought that like the cordyceps in the pipes was good. Like that honestly could have been the last shot of the episode. I thought it was good enough, and then we get the one extra stinger of Abby in the group
Mhm.
overlooking Jackson. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think both of those threats are again just representations of how you cannot just ignore the world you're living in and the things that you've done. Basically,
right.
you can't just shut everything else out and try to pretend like it's all okay. You have to be able to address this stuff, and Joel is unwilling to at this moment, and so pretty soon it seems like they're all going to be forced to.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else from this was we want to talk about in this section of the podcast, Taran?
I think we're probably ready to jump into some spoilers.
All right. If you're hopping out now, ratings and reviews are always appreciated. Likes, things like that. Make sure to subscribe. We know Scripted TV, or we know The Last of Us, and we will see you back next week. Of course, Mike and I doing the reaction pod. Tara and I doing a deep dive on the episode, and I'm giving you plenty of warning to get out of here before we start spoiling the rest of the episode, which I think we can do now.
And I will give an additional warning. These are, if you haven't left yet because you're like, I might not mind spoilers. These are big spoilers.
Big
These are
spoiler.
very,
Yeah.
very big spoilers. You do not want to be here unless you are very dedicated to being spoiled. So this is your final warning.
Proceed with caution. Okay, we're here, Taryn. It's just us and all the other people who either played the video game and know what happens, or people who didn't listen to you, and now they're gonna know that Joel gets a silly hat. No, I don't know. That's the big spoiler from game 2. You get a new hat. Yeah.
Yeah,
All
brand
right.
new hat.
Yes.
Um,
Where do you want to start?
so
Where do you want to start?
I think the biggest thing that's being talked. So there's I think a few different things to talk about. There's obviously what's coming with Joel
Yep.
and his fate,
Yep. Yep.
and how soon it's coming. I think we can talk about that later. Um, when it comes to this particular episode, there are a couple of decently big structural changes to how they're telling the story. This is something that I speculated on during season 1, or toward the end of season 1, about season 2, that I thought they might change some things around structurally. Number one, because I personally thought that game 2 had some structural issues. And number two, because even if you don't think that game 2 had structural issues, trying to tell a TV show in the way that game 2 was told is even harder. Like, even if you thought it was good for the game, you still might say, well, for the show, it's probably going to be different. So from my perspective, I think there were things to improve on, and for the format of TV, it's better to be changing it a bit anyway. So the biggest thing, obviously, that I think I've seen from a lot of people that I've seen is a bit controversial, is that they gave us that scene with Abby right away. So for context, in the game, you start the game sort of playing as Abby on approach to Jackson, and you are talking about finding him. And you're not really sure theoretically who him is or what they're doing here, and you're playing as them. Neil Druckmann talks about in the podcast that, like, in the game, because you're playing as them, you have an immediate amount of empathy for them because you are them. At least that was theoretically the intention. We then, run into Joel, and then they kill Joel, and you're theoretically left distraught, surprised, angry, so on and so forth. They're not doing it this way, and then over the course of the game, the backstory is slowly revealed. Like, okay, we're finding out they are fireflies. We're finding out that her father was the surgeon, and that she's been looking for revenge for the last 5 years. You're slowly, like, doling that information out. Some people really like that structure. I do not want to tell them that they are wrong. for me, I did not like that structure. For me, introducing us to Abby in that way was a dead giveaway that something very bad was going to happen. that Joel was very likely going to die. I had like the vibe and the worry that he was not long for this game anyway, just based on the marketing.
Yeah.
And so when we are introduced to a mysterious character with mysterious motives that I'm playing as, basically I felt like I was able to sort of guess what was going to happen for almost the entire rest of the game from that point. Okay, I'm probably going to end, like, we're probably going to end up killing Joel. And then I'm going to probably end up having to relate to this person because I'm playing as them, which means that they're going to become like, uh, we're going to have empathy with them eventually. And why would I kill? Well, she must have been related to the Firefly Massacre in some way. And so when they're slowly doling this information out, it just felt like it was agonizingly slow for me.
Yeah.
Um, in the show, we're doing things differently. Right away, we're seeing the immediate reaction from Abby to the Firefly Massacre. We are not exactly finding out who her father is immediately, but they do talk about it in the behind the scenes stuff. And we know immediately what her motivations are. So some people are taking issue with that because they liked the surprise. For myself, the surprise wasn't there anyway. And so I like that we're getting it out of the way and not treating it like it's some big story beat drop, because I think that a lot of people would be able to assume it in the first place. And I have more to say on it, but I want to give you time to
Well,
respond.
well, there's just this really interesting thing about the game that like you play as this character, you control what they're doing, and to some degree, that's like there's always an illusion of that because when it comes to any major cutscene in a game and basically anything that's dialogue, like it's not like Last of Us isn't a game where you pick which dialogue option to do, right? Like you're kind of like you're on this story, you're in it, and but there is a different like sort of visceral feel about it. And I do sort of, as much as I agree with you that I think at times the second game um isn't there's something that's a little bit off about the way that they like play through that information. I appreciate the swing of like, as somebody who does like content that is supposed to make you feel uncomfortable, I don't mind the swing of like, I'm going to make you play as a character and have empathy for a character that then is going to do this sort of unforgivable thing, and then you continue on playing as that character and try like it's trying to do this thing, but you can't have that same thing in television. Like you're not playing. There's always a level of distance between, even if you feel affection or you appreciate a character, it's a different medium. And so I think that the we were sort of talking before about whether or not that what the reaction of this will be. And I do think that there is this like extra level of vitriol that happened in the video game that I think partially has to be connected with the way that, because you play as Abby, there's almost this extra layer of like entitlement to how people felt about that. Like Laura Bailey has talked about like just how much anger she was directed her way for literally voicing a character in the show, which is horrendous. And I'm sure that there will be like moments of this happening for Caitlin Dever. And it's not like we haven't seen this in television, but I do think the way that they're setting this up for her to be, I mean, the space of a complicated antagonist protagonist like thing, I think is more well trodden territory than like playing as somebody who does something that they do in a video game. There's this like very interesting thing I think that it'll be interesting to see how it sort of plays out, and I can already see where they're trying to sort of like hedge against that to a degree. That even thing starts all the way back with casting specifically Caitlin Dever in this role, Taran.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the way that I see this, and I want to be clear that like I am not necessarily attributing motivation to the showrunners, because I did not hear them talk about this specifically in the way that I'm going to talk about it. But this is the way that sort of I immediately interpreted this, because having a main character like Joel die in the way that he does at the time that he does is fairly unusual.
Yeah.
but not unprecedented. Usually, if you're going to kill off a main character, it would like the most dangerous times for a main character to die are like the beginning of the sequel, because like usually for more practical reasons, like we gotta get rid of the
Yeah.
actor
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Um, and so and obviously the even more common times would be like the end of a season, but like that is very much or the end of a movie or whatever, very much like a danger period. And so for me, when I was playing the game, the fact that I was immediately playing as those people made them feel much more likely to do the thing that they were going to do, because they were the
Right.
game was giving them an immense amount of importance.
Right.
They are now a playable character. Like
Right.
Abby is a playable character. She clearly has a huge impact on what happens. And because I was anticipating that Joel might be in trouble and she was talking about finding him, it just immediately was apparent to me what was happening. And it almost felt like this is the way to sort of soften the blow in some ways, that like, hey, we're signaling this is an important character. This is like you're playing as them. This is going to be a huge thing in this game. Um, Whereas, as you mentioned, sort of like a more well-trodden territory is introducing a new villain at the start of a new season, and that to me, I think we'll see how it goes. I think will work a lot better, at least in the way that I'm going to view this story, because I don't think anybody that doesn't know what's going to come
Mm.
has any clue what's going to come this time. And I think that there were a lot of people that played the game outside of the leaks, outside of the marketing, who did kind of see the Joel thing coming. Um, I don't think that the show watchers, the show only watchers, have any clue. When I was in the threads for the like no spoiler thing, I saw many people talk about being excited that Abby had arrived. They were like, "Ooh, this is gonna be fun! Like, I can't wait for like some interactions. I can't wait to see them like have the attack or whatever." Like, people were like, "Oh, this is gonna be, like an exciting period of time watching this show," because what you never see is somebody set up this way actually succeed, actually telegraph to you, hey, in episode 1, I am going to slowly kill your beloved main character, and I'm going to do it for revenge. And then in episode 2, they do it in exactly the way they described. Like, that doesn't happen. You don't signal something like that. Nobody is going to expect that this is going to happen. And I think it's going to be very surprising. And I think it's going to be very infuriating. In I
It's
think a
not
good
it's
way.
not just that there's also it's also one of the biggest television and to an extent maybe not quite movie star yet, but like he's probably mm, is he the biggest television star? Right? Like television star. Like there are famous people who are on television shows. He might be the most famous television star right now. And he's
He's
just gonna
certainly up there.
be killed
And
at the end of
and
next.
and
Yeah.
what I think is interesting is that I will give some spoilers for Game of Thrones in the next like 30 to
Yeah.
60 seconds. So
Yeah.
be warned. But like this is almost exactly what they do to his character in Game of Thrones.
It
Where
really is.
like
Yeah.
they use well-trodden tropes of he's going to give this rousing speech. Tyrion is going to relent and let him fight for him. And then like the big threat is you're being told like this big guy's obviously going to beat you. And then he does. Like all of the tropes are set up for this guy to succeed, and then it works because it flips it on its head at the last moment. I think that when you're doing something that you want to be emotionally impactful, playing with tropes and using them to make your audience feel comfortable before you rip the rug out from them is often more effective than like diving entirely into newish territory and making them feel uncomfortable like anything could happen, because that might prepare them more for what's coming, which is its own tool and thing that you can do and use. But I think this personally is going to work a lot better for me in terms of the way that it's paced, and the way that it's structured. And so I think this is a better way to do this personally. I'm really excited to see how it goes down and the response to it, because again, I don't think a single soul anticipates that they will actually succeed in what they're trying to do.
Yeah, it's funny because even I think that I was like I think it was spoiled on a big thing happening in the second game, but maybe not, and kind of being like, it's probably then Joel dying, probably, but like not really knowing for sure. And that moment still is wild. I mean, the level to which this is a show that video game people are not just watching but loving, is a thing that I think will be extremely is because there's a bunch of stuff that people know are coming and have reacted to it. So the sort of cultural discourse around, and we talked about like when it's, the future and what's coming. I keep thinking that it's next episode. I know people have sort of like pushed back on that, whether or not it will be as soon as next episode. Um, I think it will, but no, nothing for sure. But I think the conversation around it is going to be very interesting. And part of my thinking about the fact that it could be next episode is, should we actually be spending more time? Like this idea to sort of like, I don't know. It's just, it's going to be really interesting to see how people react to it. And my instinct here is like, should they actually be giving Abby more time to develop as like in the sort of, in any world, however they want to develop that character before we do. And I guess the thing is next episode could be like almost entirely Abby content until it happens. But
Well, yeah. Well, I think so. There's a lot to that, right? Like, first of all, the fact that we're sort of spending more time with Joel and the relationship with Ellie, because this is another structural thing. This is like the second big structural thing that they're doing, which is that they're pulling scenes, flashbacks from like the end of the game forward to the beginning of this season. Another thing that I like that they're doing, because
right.
One of my main complaints about what they did in game 2 is that I thought there was so much interesting stuff to mine about Joel and Ellie's relationship and the fallout of the decision that was made that they skipped over in order to have the big shocking moment first, and then eventually went back and trickled some of that in. And that just wasn't effective to me, because the impact of the fallout of that relationship wasn't as meaningful to me in a post Joel world, because who cares about how much they were fighting when he's dead now? Like there's a much bigger thing that they're now dealing with, and there's still, of
Right.
course, and again, I know that it worked for some people, and it still did work to some degree. We still explored a lot of those things, but I think it works a lot better to be dealing with it now, because we're so much more invested in the relationship when you still believe that there's more of a relationship to have, and your like feeling of upset about Joel dying, I think is going to be a lot more impactful as well. I think you're going to feel a lot more of that because you were in the middle of doing something else. You were like in the middle of trying to heal this wound, and then this happens. You're going to be even more frustrated. And also, like, something that I mentioned in the non-spoiler portion is that, like, I think that another part of the misdirect here is that Abby not only represents physical danger, but also the truth coming.
Yeah.
And that's another thing
Yeah.
that you can think of, like, oh, well, she's not going to kill Joel, but maybe he'll have to explain himself, or the truth will come out in the attack, and then he'll get into a fight with Ellie, or maybe there'll be tension in the town because they'll find out the truth. And there's all kinds of different like story beats that can come from this attack that don't have to be him dying. And so I think all of that works really, really well. And it works well because we're spending more time with Joel up front. And so there's more that you can expect from his character. He's not just showing up out of nowhere and then dying. He is like a huge part of the story right now. And so cutting him short will feel more like he is being cut short. And so in addition to that, I think that not spending as much time with Abby, to me, again, is something that I like, because in the game, again, you are playing as her, which to me immediately felt like I was being manipulated into having empathy with her.
Right.
Immediately made me feel, especially when the event happened, all right, well, they're gonna eventually make me be okay with her, for, because I played as her. She gets away. She's clearly, like, I know what they're gonna do here, and I'm just waiting for it to happen. And like I did, like, I felt like they were trying to force it on me. Whereas, and I still don't know what they will do in episodes 2 or 3 or whatever. But the way it is right now, you already know her excuse. You already know her motivation.
Yeah.
She's going to come in. I feel like you're not going to feel nearly as forced to immediately empathize with her, or even like anticipate that you will eventually feel empathy with her. That like the seeds are there. You know that what she's doing is reminiscent of what Joel has done, what Ellie has done in the past. But I think when she actually does it, it will hopefully allow you to feel that like pure just disgust and hatred for this character without any expectation that you will ever have to change your mind about that. And then allowing us to change our minds on our own over time, I think would be more effective. I don't know that that's what they're going to do, but I think the way they've set it up gives us more space to do it in that way. And so I personally hope they do it in that way. Or maybe even in a way that's like, hey, isn't this just in the same way that Joel is told, like, you were a refugee?
Yeah.
It's like, you're technically correct, but I don't care.
I,
Like,
I,
there's
I,
still a
yeah,
thing.
I do think that Joel's stubborn in this episode, and it was the thing that Mike and I kind of like, we weren't like at each other's throats, but I came in being like, I was so annoyed with Joel this episode, and Mike was like, I was so annoyed with Ellie this episode. And for me though, the Joel stuff I do think is important in the sense that, I don't know, there's a couple moments in the episode that I'm like, Joel, you're lying. Like, Joel is not painted, I think, to be this super upstanding, amazing guy. He's still a person we root for, but there are these moments that I was at least frustrated. I feel like the Reddit has been more like, um, Ellie is. There's some people. I think there's been a lot of good debate in there. I think about like, she's really annoying. It's like, yeah, but she's 19, and she's also 19 in a stunted world, a world, post-apocalyptic world. I do think giving us the context at the beginning for, whenever this moment happens, I think is enough, hopefully, for this moment to land in a way that is like shocking. But I think I go back to that when you're saying like, oh, then I knew the thing was going to happen because I'm playing as Abby. To me, that goes back to this thing of, that's where I feel like Taran, I hate to break it to you, but I find you to be a very rational person. Just in terms of communicating and chatting about as much TV and movies as we do, and you're pretty rational. There are many people who I find to be not very rational, and the anger that was like dictated towards Abby, I think, is in some part of like, once you say this is a playable character, this is a person you control, there is a level of agency and like an ownership over the thing that created this really hostile environment that I think was like, is pretty unique to what happened in this show, that I just don't think the show will end up there. I think people will certainly be like mad, and I think it could be to the extreme mad that people hate, like Cersei in Game of Thrones, and like Skylar in Breaking. That's a great example of like unrational, probably like irrational hate towards a character of like
Mhm.
Skylar in Breaking Bad is kind of the extent to which I could see like uh Caitlin Dever as Abby sort of getting sort of that treatment. But I think they've already done a good enough job to sort of like do that. There's this thing, I think, did I see a quote from Neil Druckmann in the podcast that he says, who the heroes are and who the villains are is based on where you're standing.
Mhm.
Where you're standing, which I think is I'm very excited for this week of like next week, because I just do think it is going to be this extremely interesting societal examination of culture and TV and media in a way that I don't know that we've seen it before. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that you make a good point. I do want to emphasize that, like, when I'm talking about like my issues with the structure of the game, they are my issues, and obviously there are other people that had issues with the structure of the game. I think that, like, if you're looking at the criticism of game two, there's like a little bit of a mosaic,
Yeah.
and I would say the most vocal people are people that you don't want to listen to. Um, and I would say that, I don't think it's a coincidence that the people that all of the hated villains that you name villains were women.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And I
right.
think that
Yeah.
personally, I think a huge portion of the hate toward Abby was the fact that not only her role, but also the way that she looked, and
100%.
the interpretation that people had of her, and the closeness to which she is part of a different sort of like trans identity story in the game. So like I would say that's probably a huge part of it as well. But so all of that to say, again, that I think that the way that I played the game and interpreted the game is not necessarily the way that other people will. And again, I fully understand and can appreciate people that played it and really liked it and it really worked for them and they're really attached to it, especially because it is a particular style, and it is a big swing. I think that probably the way that I am trying to give my opinion here is that like I think that the way they're doing it works better for me specifically, but also I think will work better for the general audience at large. And we're not. I don't think we're going to lose anything major by losing this stuff, except for the people that experienced it firsthand and are attached to it and really did enjoy it themselves. And for those people, I can completely understand why you'd be kind of disappointed in this approach.
Yeah. Yeah, I butt up against this thing of wanting people. There's like a way in which like I wish that if people were a little, there was a little more like uh well, there's two things I think I'm like thinking about. One is the way in which, you know, we talked about in our speculation during season 1 of like, are they even going to do it the same way that they did it? Because there was such this reaction to it. And for me, the biggest thing about that was not necessarily about how it felt, but the fact that, are you really going to like kind of maybe not have Pedro Pascal in as much of the show as you possibly could? And not that the moment wouldn't happen, but where the moment might happen would be different. And was sort of some of my theorizing about the split between the seasons 2 and season 3 in terms of the video game, was that like the moment might come at the end of season 2, and then you get 2 full seasons of Pedro Pascal, and then you figure out what you want to do next in terms of if they would do flashbacks or anything like that. But they've clearly, I think so far, although there is like some mixing, like they've moved things around, it does feel like they are going to be, to some degree, pretty faithful to what happened in terms of the timeline of events. And so that to me is interesting. And so then the other part of me is thinking about, you know, whether or not, because of the way that there was like I worry about the reaction that will happen because like I just you know, I want people to like it. I want people to like feel, you know, and Caitlin Dever as well and all this stuff. So it'd be very interesting. And but the last piece is, and we've talked about this a few times, I don't know if we did it, you're talking about The Last of Us, but and unfortunately the thing I would normally go to as a great example of somebody who had source material, it was being adapted, and they said, if I'm doing it now, I might as well change the things I didn't really think worked as well. Like I'm getting another chance to write it. I'm getting a new chance to do it, which unfortunately was Sandman and Neil Gaiman. So I will, you know,
Well, that's
unfortunately,
Neil Druckmann
yeah,
talked about this a little bit in the podcast where he talked about like, him and Craig both, that like, you know, changing something isn't necessarily an admission that it wasn't correct
right,
before,
right,
but like this is an opportunity to try different things, to
right,
try new things.
right.
And I can certainly appreciate that as well.
But as two people who have put out content and written things, you know, you don't like, you can be proud of the whole thing and also think like, oh, maybe now I would go back and do this thing and do a little different. And that doesn't mean it's like bad, you know, it's actually like you get
Mhm.
another chance to do it. So I think that is interesting as well in terms of the way things will be changed. I took a
So
lot. Do you want to, yeah, go ahead.
one final piece, I think, on the reaction to what happens. And again, I can only speak from my perspective, and I know that not everyone experienced it in the same way. So, uh, like this was my reaction, but like part of part of the frustration I had with the game in general and the story in general is that, like I said, because I anticipated, even in the moment, that that I was going to eventually come to understand why, because they were so stingy on details for motivation for Abby. I knew that there'd be a reveal that would make it feel more justified, and that made the moment feel more frustrating because again, it felt like I was being manipulated by the story
Right.
to feel a certain way, only for the story to then flip the script on me.
Right.
And that made me frustrated with the story more than it made me frustrated with Abby personally.
Right. Right.
And I think and hope that what they will be able to do with the show is instead of making me feel that way, genuinely make me feel frustrated with Abby.
Right.
Like I
Right.
know why you're doing this. It doesn't mean I agree with it, and I
Right.
can feel that way in the moment, and genuinely want Ellie to get revenge. So that I genuinely feel that way, and then have that actually change over time. I think, which is the intended response that I think a lot of people did get, but did not work for me.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that the show's version of this will give me that response because I really want this story to work for me because I do appreciate what it's trying to do. So that's what I'm personally weirdly excited about. And so I think if we get a lot of Abby hate after the next episode or two, I think that's going to be a good thing. And you know, of course, there's always going to be other stuff, but like I think that we should feel very
Yeah. Yeah.
frustrated with Abby, and not feel frustrated with Abby in the sense that like, oh well, we're eventually gonna have to root for her frustrated, but like
Right.
I
Right.
want her dead in this
Right.
show frustrated.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what I feel like I'm pushing up against, is the sense that like I want people to feel that, and I also don't want people to go and like stalk, like
Right.
harass
Like
Caitlin Dever,
we want we want
Yeah.
the audience to feel frustrated with the character in the show,
In the same way we're
not
frustrated with Joel and Ellie at times, right?
right,
Yeah.
right. We don't want them to be frustrated with the character in the narrative,
Right. Right.
basically.
Right. That's a
Because
really good
that's
way
when
of
I
putting
think
it.
people start to get more invested in like the actor and the writers and why
Yeah.
are they doing this?
Yes.
Where versus like I know I understand why you did this. I know you're a character in a show and I understand why you did this in this show and I'm
Yeah.
so mad at you in this show and I want you
Yeah.
to die and I want Ellie to kill you.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really good. Yeah, you've sort of articulated, like I was struggling to name the thing. Let's type there's a few other little things that I want to talk about. I'll throw it to you. Either we could talk about the cordyceps and the pipes, or we could talk about Eugene a little bit. And I'm wondering which one you would want to start with. If there's anything else you want to touch
I'm happy to start with Eugene. I do want to just also like
on.
I think put a cap on this. Like, do we think, because you mentioned this, is this going to happen next episode? Is it
Oh,
episode 2?
I'll give everyone my thoughts and feelings because they're a little bit meta. The reason I think it's happening next episode, HBO has been incredibly stingy with press screeners for this season. There are a lot of people who didn't get anything, and so this might be the no screeners thing might just be because they know they have a hit. They don't need everyone to see it. They are okay. And HBO has been hit, not normally from the press, but there have been occasions where episodes have leaked. This was a big problem with Game of Thrones, where sometimes international HBO versions would put their episode out early, would get spread around online. So they have been a little more careful with things. And if they have a show that is coming back, they are pretty stingy with giving out those screeners. There's an extra little thing to this. I'll say when Succession was happening, they were basically like, hey, there's a big spoiler thing that was happening, like a big thing, probably the biggest thing that happens in the show. That week, they're like, nobody's getting screeners. Everyone was like, well, that's what's happening. It's not like, So
Well,
I'm like
Grace, also,
reading.
I don't know, you might know this, but the director of that episode is
Oh,
directing the next episode of The Last of Us.
well, there you go. There you go, maybe. But there is a world where it doesn't happen next week, and it was literally only that they're just be like they know they have a hit. They don't. There's a perfectly valid reason that does not mean that Joel is dying this upcoming episode. That would make sense to me. And so all this to say, where I'm either reading way too much into it, or uh they have done an incredible job of like reframing how they approached like you can't see this stuff yet because we're worried about you seeing it. They reframed it as like we're being much more selective. People can have one episode, maybe like you might like a lot of people. I know the Ringer said they didn't get any screeners. At least the Watch did. So that's sort of like I feel like I'm a little bit in the meta of it all. I do think storyline wise it would make sense, but what do you think it's happening? You think
Yeah,
it's
I mean, I will go completely non-meta then with
yeah.
this, with my interpretation. I, before the season started, and I think we talked about it in season one, I fully expected them to wait longer. I really thought that they would give it even more space, and they have given it more space than the game did. But I was really not expecting it to be in the first two episodes. However, having watched episode one, I just don't see a world narratively where they can wait until episode three. I feel like it has to be like the only way it makes sense is if they change enough where there's maybe like an infected attack, and then Abby and company infiltrate Jackson and spend some time amongst them first, and then they do it in episode three. But that doesn't even make a ton of sense to me. Like, what are they doing in those two episodes? Especially like there's a limited amount of episodes this season.
Shorter
Like,
season, yeah, 7 episodes.
so
Yeah.
I just have a hard time seeing them wait that long to kick the story off. Again, what I will say is that like there's some space for it, which is this debate about letting people in versus keeping them out. And what I talked about with like the threat of the truth coming out, like genuinely, we could get more of the truth coming out in Jackson, and that causing issues, at least within a small group of people to keep it contained. Like Tommy, for example, hasn't found out from Joel, at least in the show, about what happened. So he might maybe discover the truth about what happened, and they might have some drama. Like there's stuff that they could do to prolong it, but it doesn't feel like they've given themselves enough runway to make it last until presumably the end of episode three. To me, it almost has to be episode two now.
Yeah, the only thing we can sort of like put up so one, season 1 of the show is incredibly faithful to the way the game plays out. With like the only place where it starts to deviate is when they go on these like they expand into something, you know? So and I think the only like outlier we have is sort of episode 3 in terms of like putting a marker on something that is so different where we spent a whole thing there. I actually think to tie it to the Eugene step, I could see 3 being uh yeah, I don't know. There's a rumor of like they're doing another one of those episodes, and I could actually see that
Mm.
being episode 3 again. Um,
That would
although
be, man, if they
I
kill
know.
Joel and then cut and then do a bottle episode right after.
So the
No,
only thing is, I
they
would
cannot do
say
that.
that yeah, that's true. I would presume the bottle episode would heavily involve Joel to some degree. So it'd basically be a way of like when I say bottle episode, I don't imagine it the exact same way as what happened. I see it more as it would essentially be like a flashback. Where like it would happen, and then we're going to flashback to a new sort of expanding on something new. And I'll just say it now, here where we're at, which is Eugene's death in the game is he dies of natural causes. And that actually is a pretty important beat of the story, that civilization has got to the point where people can die in other ways other than, you know, the catastrophic world that's out there, like the infected. This idea that Joel has killed him, I think what we're gonna set up is like we're gonna learn more information about why that happened, how that happened, that
It
maybe
has
even
to be Joel's fault, I think.
Joel's fault. Yeah. Well, I
In
see it
some
as
way, whether it's Joel's fault or Ellie's fault, it has to be connected, I think, to what they did. Because I think that what they've done, I would assume, is that this is going to be a little bit of a meta commentary on for game players. Where like, yeah, Eugene is the guy that died from natural causes. He is the symbol of like things going right
yeah,
in Jackson. And so for Joel to have caused his death in the show version is just an example of Joel corrupting what's around him because of his
right.
inability to, deal with what he did.
I was seeing it as potentially like a world where Joel like Eugene asked Joel to be like, and he can't do it for like he doesn't want Gail to think that he like left, like something like that. But I think your read is way stronger. Like it's a world where I think episode 3 could be like a Joel Eugene thing. Like
Well,
all the
that's true
events,
though too. The like, I mean, if the Eugene stuff comes after Joel's death,
right?
like it would be strange to continue to beat the literal dead horse of Joel bad decision. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like once he dies,
Right.
you kind of want to be a little kinder to him as a character.
And I think there's a world where that's actually more about Joel being a person who can help, like, is it about like self-sacrifice stuff. I think like there's something in there where it's like he's the guy who's willing to do the things that other people don't want to do, and maybe even
That
like
makes sense.
Eugene feeding that into, like, there's a world where like that's why Joel feels extra like
Joel
Eugene.
takes the blame for something as a way of sacrificing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's the sort of stuff I'm like thinking about with Eugene, and then the way it's connected to Gale and all the stuff here. So yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting. It certainly does. I don't think it can be. I think it does have to be this world where it's like it is an important beat about it being um uh not super like I guess it could still be infected related, like, but we'll see.
I think your theory actually makes more sense to me because one thing I was running up against in the idea that like this is going to be Joel's fault to some degree was like it's really messed up to then use the widow of the person that you caused the death of as your therapist. Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just feel like that's a bit of a bridge too far.
I think there's probably only many only probably what happened is that he has weird insurance where he only gets psychotherapy covered instead of actual therapy,
Mm.
so he has to use a psycho. That she's the only psychotherapist in town, you know.
And especially paying her via like
Weed,
weed that you grew that
yeah,
her husband used to grow.
yeah.
It's
Um,
just a bit messed up, dude.
Anyway, it's kind of fun. I mean, this is the type of stuff where I think like as the show is so faithful to the video game, and yet it can sort of deviate, and it's very fun to explore. Like we're literally theorizing more so on like, yeah, but how does it thematically make sense, you know, than like what do I want to see on the show? You know,
Mhm.
it's very fun. It's very good. Um
Yeah.
we talk about the cordyceps in the pipes because that's that I remember this doesn't happen in the game. Like this is not a thing. Am I right?
Well, no, because this is kind of a new concept for the show in general, is this idea of there being like this what is it? Like the tendrils or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, because we've also removed like we don't have any spores in
Not
the
yet.
not yet. That is true.
Because that's
Um
how Dina discovers Ellie's immunity. So we
that's
could
right.
still get that, but we could also just get her like discovering the bite that just happened.
Yeah.
That didn't happen this early, at least. So I don't know, there's a few different ways.
Um, do you have a sense of where this is like like it feels like it's set up for a Jackson set piece, you know? It's kind of a little bit
Yeah.
what I feel like.
I
What
have
would
to
you
imagine.
Yeah.
I have to imagine it's a Jackson set piece again, as in part because it's like in the game, there's like infected stuff happening because you have to play the game.
Mhm.
But this I think also can function as a bit of a further misdirect. That like, yeah, these people are here to attack and kill Joel, but hey guys, there's bigger issues. There's a huge attack now, and that and it does function this way in the game as well to some degree, that like you're like, oh well, there's a thing that we're now dealing with together,
Mhm.
and that will ease some tensions and it will allow for some communication, and you know, so on and so forth. So it
Yeah.
allows them to have a big action set piece leading into the violence to come. I think it makes a lot of sense, and also fits into their theme about like nature pushing back and not forgetting about where you are, what you're doing.
It's that too, and I also like this idea of like a lot of Joel and Ellie's storylines are about like the protective walls they put up and who they let in. And so this idea that like Joel is and again, there's this thematic thing of like Joel is the one literally designing and building and fixing and like putting and like he has the scene. The thing I clocked like I is the scene with Tommy's son, like Joel's nephew. Like that is such a good example of, and this is where I think like even minor scenes, the show just like knows how to like hit their points, which is he's having this very cute moment with his nephew, and yet their like interaction is about killing monsters, and then like his nephew like shoots a gun, like, like pretends to shoot him, and Joel pretends to die, you know, which also not fun to watch. Like wait till next week, everybody, you know. But
Mhm.
that thing. So the theme of like Joel is the one like building the city, not wanting to let people in, and it's being like sort of corrupted anyway. You know, I think that there's just such strong thematics too. I like this addition here. On top of that, they probably just want to make sure that they can use the set piece that they built with a bunch of infected on set. So
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. I also just going back to Dina a little bit. I really I want to like reiterate. I really like the change made to Dina's character to have her be, and it's not like a massive change.
mhm,
It feels kind of subtle, but for her to be so captivating
mm,
in the show, I think is huge because Dina is such an important part of Ellie's story.
yep,
And I think that in the game she is just a little too muted for such an important role.
mhm,
And I think that like you really want, because like Dina really represents just like a rebirth, right? Like moving on, and like that is the new life that Ellie eventually comes to. Um and so I think for to have the audience kind of fall in love with her as well so quickly, I think is huge. And then also it allows for a deeper contrast for like all of the things that she's going to go through
yeah,
and the ways that that is probably going to dim her shine.
yeah,
And you're going to feel that even more. And you're going to feel that Ellie is dragging her into that, right? Like Ellie is really like taking this wonderful person and causing her to be in these different situations and to be much more muted and all of that stuff. And so like I think that there's a lot more you can do with that character with such a strong starting place.
yeah. Um, Yeah, I sort of I feel like after this episode, like, talking about it twice for quite an extended period of time, I'm pretty in. I think it was a very good episode, but I'm also I am a little bit like I feel like I'm like totally bought in to what they're doing. Like I actually agree with some of the, like your the things you talked about in terms of like the way the Eugene stuff is introduced in the conversation with Gail that maybe felt confusing. That opening scene maybe not being like quite as maybe like it doesn't place us as well as maybe the show could have done with an opening scene. And I agree with those. And I actually think if like those are our like smallest of complaints at the moment, I'm feeling like we're in for a pretty good
Yeah,
ride here.
like I said, I think that my biggest complaint is that like it was a little bit of like the Wire, episode one
Mm-hmm.
season. Like it was like not all episodes can be like the most thrilling things in the world sometimes. And this episode does, I think, a lot of really good necessary stuff. And especially if next episode is going to be as big as we think it is, like it really makes sense for this episode to be what it is.
Yeah.
And so I was actually thinking about it when I was trying to rate the episode. I was like really struggling because episode ratings for me
Yeah.
are
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
strange in the first place.
Yeah.
And like I was like, obviously, any episode of The Last of Us is better than almost any other show that I'm watching.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like hard to even give it a proper scale.
Yeah.
But like in the world, so I was like, okay, I have to only like I'm not comparing this to any other show. This is like an 8 out of 10 Last of Us episode
Yeah.
where it's like very very good, nothing super popping, and not like the big episode. And so I'm trying to give myself space for like the next episode to be like a magnitude of 2 points better, right? You know what I mean? Because I
Mm-hmm.
assume it will be.
Yeah.
But that's not really a knock on the episode or the show.
No, I
It's
agree.
just a necessary thing for this episode to be, especially given what's coming.
Yeah. Um, that's why Steven Bishop says ranking is arbitrary and reductive. So that's ranking though, not rating. So
Exactly.
yeah. All right. Anything else, Taran, from this from the premiere episode of The Last of Us?
I think that's it.
All right. What else you got going on?
Uh, Plenty of stuff. We're talking about Big Brother. We're doing other scripted things. We're doing the Tastemakers, which of course you should check out if you enjoyed this. There's lots of stuff like this, not like as much in-depth stuff, but we talk about lots of different shows that are airing and news and stuff like that. We've also got the Wheel of Time finale this week, so that'll be
That's
very
right.
fun. We got Andor coming up in a few weeks as well, so stay tuned for that. And find me on YouTube and Twitch, hanging out, watching shows, playing games, fun stuff like that.
Cool. You can find me online at Hi From Grace or at Go From Grace. And of course, I'm here on RHAP, We Know Scripted TV. We will be back next week with another deep dive, which I believe, Taran, while we were filming. I got it officially confirmed that this is officially the deep dive. It's no longer video game clubs. That's old news. Video game club. It's a deep dive now, and this is the deepest of dives in the back half of the podcast. All right, we'll see everyone next time. Until then, bye bye.